Life moves at a silver velocity, a blur of light and sound that requires a steady hand to navigate and a brave heart to survive. We capture the high-speed moments that define our era in stunning high definition. Hit subscribe now and keep up with the pace of the future.
My neighbor knocked on my door on a Tuesday morning in October, and the look on his face told me something was wrong before he even opened his mouth. His name is Walt, not Walt from the file. A different Walt. My actual neighbor of 6 years. Actually, let me back up. His name is Doug. No, let me just tell the story the way it happened. His name is Cliff. He's lived next door to me for 6 years, a retired postal worker with a bad knee and a habit of walking his beagle at exactly 6:45 every morning. Cliff doesn't knock on doors. Cliff waves from driveways. So when I heard that knock, I already knew something was off. "You got a construction crew coming this week?" he asked. I told him no. "Because there's been a white pickup in your driveway. 2-3 times in the last month. Men carrying things in and out. I work in field service for an industrial equipment company. I calibrate and repair large format printing systems for commercial clients, the kind of machines that print billboard vinyl, vehicle wraps, trade show displays. My territory covers a 6-state region: Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Western Pennsylvania. Most weeks I leave Sunday night and come back Thursday afternoon, sometimes Friday. My wife and I divorced 3 years ago. The house in Westerville, a suburb northeast of Columbus, was the one thing I kept. 11 years of mortgage payments. I wasn't giving that up. So I'm gone a lot. I know that. I've always known that. But the house was mine. It was paid down to something manageable, and it felt like the one stable thing left after everything else fell apart. I had a neighbor who kept an eye out. I had a Ring doorbell on the front door. I had what I thought was a normal, quiet life. I thanked Cliff and told him I'd look into it. Then I sat at my kitchen table for about 20 minutes staring at nothing. The thing is, I hadn't actually reviewed my doorbell footage in months. I set it up 2 years ago when there was a string of car break-ins in the neighborhood, and then life got busy and I basically forgot about it. The app was still on my phone. I opened it that morning for the first time in a long time. There were hundreds of motion alerts I'd never opened. I started scrolling back through them. A lot of it was nothing. A delivery driver, squirrels, my own car pulling in and out. But then I found one from 3 weeks earlier. A white pickup truck pulling into my driveway at 9:20 on a Wednesday morning. 2 men getting out. One of them had a key. He put it in the lock, turned it, and they both walked inside. I watched it 3 times. I had not given anyone a key to my house. I had 1 copy on my keychain. A spare had lived in the lockbox on the back door for emergencies, but I'd taken that out more than a year ago because the code was old and I kept meaning to update it. I kept scrolling. The same truck appeared again 8 days later. Then again 5 days after that. Each time between 9 and 11 in the morning. Each time, the same man with the key. I called in sick to work that day. I hadn't called in sick in 4 years. I want to be honest about something. My first instinct was not to call the police. My first instinct was to drive home immediately, wait inside, and confront whoever came through that door. I'm not a violent person, but I'm also not someone who responds well to feeling like I'd been made a fool of in my own home. I sat in that kitchen with my laptop open and my jaw tight, and I almost did it. Instead, I called my attorney. She handles the occasional contract dispute for my company, and I've used her for personal stuff twice before. I told her what I'd found. She told me to slow down. "Don't go in there yet," she said. "If someone has been using that property and you want any chance of real legal consequences, you need documentation. You need them caught in the act, on camera, ideally with a witness." She also told me something I hadn't considered. Depending on what had been happening, I might have tax exposure. If someone was running any kind of commercial activity out of my address, that got complicated fast. I drove home anyway, just to look. I parked on the next street over and walked around the block. Everything looked normal from the outside. Curtains were closed the way I left them. Porch light was on the timer. Nothing obviously wrong. But when I let myself in through the back door, I stood in the kitchen and felt it immediately. The air was different. Not dirty, not bad. Actually almost cleaner than I expected, but there was a smell I didn't recognize. Something like a commercial cleaner, the kind with a fake pine scent. I use unscented dish soap and a basic all-purpose spray. This wasn't that. I opened the refrigerator. There was a case of sparkling water on the bottom shelf, a brand I've never bought, the kind that comes in dark green cans. A block of cheddar, still in the grocery store wrap, from a Kroger I don't shop at. 2 bottles of Gatorade, and a takeout container from a barbecue place I'd never heard of, with a receipt stapled to the bag showing a purchase date from 11 days ago. I stood there holding the refrigerator door open for probably a full minute. Then I walked through the rest of the house. In the living room, the couch had been moved 6 inches to the left. I know this because there's a dent in the carpet where the left rear leg always sits, and the leg was no longer in the dent. The coffee table had been repositioned too, angled slightly, the way you might angle it if you wanted to fit more people comfortably in the space. In the second bedroom, the one I use as an office, the folding table I keep against the wall had been pulled out and set up in the center of the room. There were 4 folding chairs arranged around it. Chairs I did not own. They were leaning against the wall near the closet, like someone had stacked them there after use. I opened the closet. My boxes of tax documents and old files were still there. But pushed to the side, behind them, was a soft-sided cooler I had never seen before. I unzipped it. It was empty and clean, but there was a faint smell of food. Cooked meat, maybe. The kind of smell that clings to fabric. I went into the bathroom. This was the part that stayed with me longest afterward. There was a different soap dispenser on the sink. Not my soap. A hand soap with a label from a brand I associated with hotels. The kind that comes in matching sets, dispenser and lotion. My soap, a plain bar of dial, was gone. Someone had replaced it. On the edge of the tub, there was a bottle of shampoo and a bottle of conditioner, both nearly empty. My shampoo was in the shower caddy where I left it. Someone had been showering in my house. I sat down on the edge of the tub for a long time, not because I was scared, more because the scale of it was starting to come into focus. This wasn't one incident. This wasn't someone who broke in on a whim and poked around. This was organized, repeated. Someone had been using my home on a schedule, and they'd been doing it for a while. I took photos of everything: the refrigerator, the furniture, the chairs, the cooler, the soap. I didn't touch anything except the cooler zipper, which I'd already touched. Then I left, locked up, and sat in my car on a side street for 40 minutes trying to think. The question that kept coming back was simple: how did they know when I'd be gone? My schedule isn't secret, but it's not public either. My clients know when I'm coming. My company has my calendar. My ex-wife knows roughly what my schedule looks like from years of living with it. But I hadn't spoken to her in 5 months, and I couldn't imagine why she'd be involved in this. Who else? I thought about the past year. Had anyone asked about my schedule? Had anyone seemed too interested in when I was home versus when I was away? And then I thought about the water heater. About 8 months ago in February, my water heater started making a sound, a low thumping that happened every time the heat kicked on. I looked it up online and decided I needed someone to flush the sediment. I called a local plumbing company, a small operation I found through a next-door recommendation. 2 guys came out. The job took about 2 hours. They were professional, polite. I paid the invoice, left them a good review, and forgot about them. While they were there, I'd gotten a work call and stepped outside to take it. For about 20 minutes, I was in the backyard with the door open, talking, not paying attention to what was happening inside. At some point during that job, one of those men had a window to make a copy of my key or to take note of where a spare was kept. My keychain had been on the hook by the garage door. I couldn't say for certain whether it had been touched. I hadn't thought to check at the time. I drove to a hardware store and bought 2 new deadbolts. I installed them myself that afternoon. Then I called my attorney back and told her what I'd found and what I suspected. She told me the key, no pun intended, was catching them inside on camera before I made any accusations. She helped me schedule a call with a local attorney in Columbus who had experience with civil trespass cases. He told me the same thing: document, document, document. Don't tip them off. Don't change the locks yet. I had already changed the locks. He paused for a moment and then said in a very neutral tone, "Okay." That changes the approach. Without the ability to catch them in the act, the footage I had was still valuable, but building a case was going to be harder. We'd need to identify the men, connect them to a specific entry, and prove it was unauthorized. The plumbing company angle was promising. If I could show they'd done the job, establish that they'd had access to my keys, and then connect their truck to the footage from my doorbell camera, it was at least a credible starting point. I spent the next 3 evenings going back through every motion alert on my doorbell app, screenshot by screenshot. The white pickup appeared on camera 7 times over a period of roughly 4 months. I could make out partial plates on 2 of the appearances. I gave those to my attorney. She hired a private investigator to run them. It took 11 days. The truck was registered to a man I'll call the plumber's partner, the second guy who'd come out for the water heater job. Not the one who'd done most of the talking. The quiet one who'd mostly stayed in the utility room. Here's the part that I found most unsettling. More than the strange soap or the moved furniture or any of it, at some point either that day or later, he had gone through my mail. My attorney's investigator found this out when he started digging into the business. It turned out the address had been used on at least 2 applications, probably to establish a local address for some kind of short-term service offering, the details of which were murky, but appeared to involve charging people for access to a residential kitchen. Ohio has cottage food laws that allow limited food sales from home kitchens, and whatever he was doing seemed to be operating in a gray area around those rules. My address, my kitchen, my liability potentially, if anything had gone wrong. The IRS question my attorney raised was real. If someone had been generating income using my property and my address, even without my knowledge, sorting out the paper trail was going to take time. We sent a formal demand letter through my attorney. We laid out the evidence, the footage, the investigator's findings, the connection to the plumbing job. We didn't go to the police, not because I didn't consider it, but because my attorney's honest assessment was that criminal trespass charges were uncertain given the complexity of proving unauthorized entry versus some claim of an informal arrangement, however fabricated. The civil route gave us more control. I won't share the full terms of what was settled. What I'll say is that it was resolved. He acknowledged what had happened. There was a payment arrangement. The plumbing company is no longer operating under that name. I sold the house in Westerville 8 months after all of this. Not because I felt unsafe. The locks were new, the cameras were upgraded. I knew exactly what had happened and that it had stopped. I sold it because every time I came home from a work trip and put the key in the lock, there was half a second where I hesitated. Just a beat. And I didn't want to spend the next 10 years of my life having that half second. I bought a condo closer to downtown Columbus. Smaller. A doorman in the lobby. A parking garage with a code. It doesn't have a yard, and sometimes I miss having a yard. But I sleep better. The thing my attorney said that I keep coming back to, the thing I couldn't have told you before any of this happened, is how much of your vulnerability is created by routine. He knew when I'd be gone because I was always gone on the same days. He knew how long I'd be away because the pattern was consistent enough to book around. I'd made myself predictable, and predictability is a resource someone else can use. I still travel for work, probably always will. But I bury my return days now when I can. I don't post about my trips. I have a neighbor with a key, a real one, someone I actually trust, not a lockbox code that sat unchanged for years. I review my camera footage every Sunday night without fail. The road takes something from you over time. That part was always true. I just didn't know it could be taken by someone I'd left through my front door to fix a water heater. I check the footage now every week, without fail. I've thought about the water heater a lot since all of this ended. Not the machine itself, the 20 minutes I spent outside on the phone while 2 strangers were alone in my house. That's where it started. Not with any grand scheme, not with some elaborate plan. Just a window I left open without realizing it. That's usually how these things work. What I took from this, and it took me a while to be honest with myself about it, is that I had gotten careless in a way that felt like trust but was really just inattention. There's a difference. Real trust is something you extend deliberately to specific people for specific reasons. What I had was more like a general assumption that nothing bad would happen because nothing bad had happened yet. That's not trust. That's just luck wearing a familiar coat. The man who used my house wasn't some mastermind. He saw an opportunity. A predictable schedule, an accessible key, a home that sat empty on a reliable rotation, and he took it. The cause was simple. The effect stretched out over 4 months and cost me more in legal fees, stress, and eventually a house I'd spent 11 years paying for than I can easily calculate. Actions have weight. The ones we think no one notices often carry the most. What I wish I'd done differently isn't just the practical stuff. The cameras, the lock audit, the varied schedule, those matter, and I do all of them now. But more than that, I wish I'd paid attention. Real attention. The kind that notices when your soap has been replaced. The kind that reviews a camera app instead of letting 1,000 alerts pile up unread. Intelligence isn't just about what you know. It's about what you actually look at. I had the tools. I just wasn't using them. And the staying power to see it through. The months of documentation, the attorney calls, the restraint it took to not just drive home and blow the whole thing up out of anger. That was the part I didn't know I had until I needed it. Cliff asked me once, after everything settled, how I kept it together long enough to build a real case instead of just confronting the guy. I told him I didn't feel like I kept it together. I felt like I was white-knuckling it the entire time. But I kept making the next right call, and then the next one, and eventually there was a resolution that actually meant something, instead of just a shouting match in a driveway. I sold the house. I don't regret it. The condo is quieter in every sense of the word. I review the camera footage on Sunday nights. I know my neighbors. I vary my return days. Cliff still walks his beagle at 6:45 every morning. I brought him a bottle of bourbon after everything was settled. It wasn't enough. It never is when someone looks out for you and you weren't even aware you needed it.